Chapter 40, Black Thread. End our lives, you arrogant brat. Butcher Kale didn't know what kind of magic Damien was using, but he didn't care. He was a peak third-order warrior, known for his brute strength and cruelty. He had crushed skulls with his bare hands. Die! Kale lunged, swinging his massive, glowing red branding iron like a mace. He aimed directly for Damien's head, putting every ounce of his mana into the strike. Damien didn't dodge. He simply raised his left hand, the one wreathed in the pitch-black smoke of the midnight tome. Clang! The branding iron hit an invisible wall of solidified shadow inches from Damien's face. The force of the blow created a shockwave that kicked up dust, but Damien's feet didn't move a millimeter. "Is that it?" Damien asked, his voice bored. He tilted his head. The golden slit in his right eye pulsed. Golden dragon art, King's aura. Whoosh! A blinding golden light erupted from Damien's body. It wasn't just light, it was heat. Intense, scorching heat that mimicked a dragon's breath. The iron weapon in Kale's hand instantly turned white-hot, then liquid. "Arghhh!" Kale screamed, dropping the melting metal as it burned the flesh off his palm. He stumbled back, clutching his ruined hand. "My hand! What kind of magic is?" "The kind that judges trash like you." Damien took a step forward. He didn't run, he didn't rush. He flickered. Using Shadow Step, he appeared instantly behind the screaming butcher. Shadow Guillotine. Damien waved his hand horizontally. A thin, razor-sharp blade of darkness manifested and sliced through the air. The screaming stopped abruptly. Kale's head slid off his shoulders, a look of pure terror frozen on his face. His heavy body collapsed into the mud with a wet thud. Silence descended on the courtyard. The 50 mercenaries who had been charging froze. They looked at their strongest lieutenant, beheaded in a single second by a boy who wasn't even breathing hard. "A monster," one mercenary whispered, backing away. "He's a monster." "Hold your ground, you cowards." A booming voice echoed from the main keep. The heavy double doors at the top of the stairs burst open. A man stepped out. He was clad in full-plate armor made of enchanted steel, carrying a massive greatsword. His aura was heavy and suffocating, a genuine fourth-order knight. "Vargas, the Slaver King." "You dare attack my fortress?" Vargas roared, his aura flaring like a brown storm around him. "Do you know who backs me? Do you know who I pay tribute to?" Damien looked up at the Slaver King. He felt the pressure of the fourth-order aura. In the original novel, Vargas was a mid-boss who gave the protagonist trouble. He had high defense and earth-based attacks, but back then, the protagonist didn't have a dual core. "I don't care who backs you," Damien said, his voice amplified by mana so every slave and soldier could hear. "Because tonight, they are losing their investment." Arrogant, Vargas jumped from the balcony, landing in the courtyard with an earth-shattering crash. "Kill him! All of you attack at once!" The mercenaries, emboldened by their leader, roared and charged again. "Isabel Lyra," Damien commanded calmly without looking back. "Clean up the trash. The big one is mine." "Understood." Twang, twang, twang. 3 arrows flew from the ridge. 3 mercenaries dropped dead, arrows in their throats. "Roar!" Isabel stepped forward, unleashed a wave of fire that consumed the left flank of the enemy formation. "Don't touch the young master." While his team handled the minions, Damien walked toward Vargas. Vargas swung his greatsword, Earth Splitter. A wave of jagged rocks erupted from the ground, tearing toward Damien. Damien didn't block. He activated both cores at maximum output. Dual Art Golden Shadow Flash. He became a blur of black and gold. He weaved through the jagged rocks like smoke, moving faster than Vargas's eyes could track. He appeared directly in front of the Slaver King. Too slow. Damien punched. His fist was coated in the golden dragon aura, concentrating the weight of a mountain into a single point. Boom! He hit Vargas directly in the chest plate. The enchanted steel armor, worth a fortune, shattered like glass. Vargas was launched backward, smashing through the stone wall of the barracks and burying himself in the rubble. Vargas coughed blood, struggling to stand. His chest was caved in. Fear, real and primal fear, filled his eyes. Wait, I surrender. I have gold. I have connections I can give you. Unfortunately, Damien didn't care for his pleas. Walking through the hole in the wall, the golden aura had faded, leaving only an ominous, swirling shadow around him. Surrender, Damien tilted his head. He looked past Vargas, toward the cages where the slaves were huddled in terror. He saw the burns on their skin. He saw the hunger in their eyes. You didn't let them surrender, Damien said softly. He raised his hand. The shadows in the room converged, forming a massive, executioner's spike above Vargas. I am Damien Voss, and I don't make deals with the dead. No, wait, the Twilight Association will. Squelch. The shadow spike dropped. Vargas was silenced forever. System alert. Enemy defeated. Slaver King Vargas, Fourth Order. Plot change detected. Destroyed a major supply line for the Twilight Association. Reward, 600 DP. Damien exhaled, letting the adrenaline fade. He checked his balance, 600 DP. He was back in business. He walked back out into the courtyard. It was over. Isabel and Lyra stood amidst a field of bodies. The remaining mercenaries had thrown down their weapons, begging for mercy on their knees. Young master, Isabel asked, her clothes slightly stained but her eyes clear. What do we do with the survivors? Damien looked at the mercenaries, men who had profited from misery for years. They saw our faces, Damien said coldly, and they chose this life, Lyra. Lyra looked at him. Her expression was hard. She remembered her squad. No mercy, the elf said. You heard her, Damien said, turning away. Isabel, burn them. Lyra, free the captives. 1 hour later. The fortress was silent. The fires had been put out and the cages were open. In the center of the yard, over 100 freed slaves gathered. Elves, beastmen, humans. They looked at Damien with a mixture of fear and awe. To them, he was a terrifying savior, a boy who wielded darkness and light and commanded a demon. Damien stood on a crate, looking down at them. You are free, he announced. Take the gold from the treasury, go home, hide, do whatever you want. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on 3 specific individuals. First, Lyra's elven squad. They were injured but alive, hugging Lyra and crying. Second, a girl with lion ears and a tail, nursing a broken arm but standing tall. Leona. Third, an unassuming old man with sharp eyes, and a chubby merchant who was already calculating the value of the dead mercenaries' gear. The spy and the manager. However, Damien continued, his voice dropping an octave, if you have nowhere to go, if you want revenge on the world that put you in those cages. He held up his hand. The contract gem glowed faintly, not to enslave but to signal power. Then join me. I am building something new, a force that strikes from the shadows, a force that ensures no one puts chains on us again. The crowd murmured. Most were too broken to fight. They took the gold and ran. But a few stayed. Leona limped forward. She looked Damien in the eye. You killed the butcher, you killed the king, you are strong. She knelt on one knee. My life is yours. The old man and the merchant exchanged a look, then stepped forward too. Better to serve a dragon than be eaten by wolves, the merchant muttered. Damien smiled. It was a terrifying, ambitious smile. Good, Leona, you are my sword. You will travel with me. He turned to the old man and the merchant. You too, I have a different task. You will take this gold. You will stay here in Gravestone. You will take over Vargas's network. I want eyes and ears in every market, every guild and every noble house. We are the black thread, Damien declared, looking at his new small army. And tonight we begin to weave a new destiny. He turned to look north, toward the distant mountains. Now, Lyra, get your squad ready. We're going to the Elven Empire. Time soon passed. The fires of the slaver fortress had burned low, leaving only glowing embers and the smell of ash in the morning air. Damien sat on a throne, not a metaphorical one, but the actual velvet and iron chair Vargas, the slaver king, had used to overlook his yard. Now Vargas was dead, buried under the rubble of his own ambition, and Damien sat in his place, counting gold. Final tally, Damien asked, tossing a heavy gold coin into the air. 3,000,000 gold coins in liquid assets, a voice answered smoothly. Another 5,000,000 in weapons, armor, and magical artifacts, and a ledger containing the names of every noble in the Dragon Empire who purchased slaves from this facility. The speaker was the chubby merchant Damien had rescued. He had cleaned himself up, found a silk robe from Vargas's wardrobe, and was currently tapping away at a calculator artifact with terrifying speed. Barnaby, the man who, in the original novel, would have become the Empire's greatest smuggler before being executed by the protagonist for price gouging during the Demon War. A list of nobles, Damien mused, catching the coin. That's worth more than the gold. It's leverage. Keep it safe, Barnaby. Of course, my king, Barnaby bowed low, his eyes gleaming with greed not for money, but for the opportunity Damien represented. Standing in the shadows behind Barnaby was the old man. He hadn't bothered to change his rags. He just stood there, blending so perfectly into the darkness that even Lyra had trouble spotting him. Cypher, a retired spy who had been sold into slavery by a corrupt official. In the original story, he died in the cages. Now he was Damien's eyes. And the network, Damien asked, turning to the old man. Vargas had contacts in 12 major cities, Cypher rasped, his voice dry. Messengers, bribed guards, smugglers, I have the codes. I can take over the network by week's end. They won't even know Vargas is dead, they'll just think management has changed. Excellent. Damien stood up. He walked down the steps to where his core team was waiting. Isabel was cleaning soot off her uniform, looking annoyed at the stains. Lyra was inspecting her mana bow strings. And Leona, the lion beast girl, was strapping on a massive set of plate armor they had looted from the armory. She wielded a greatsword that looked too heavy for a normal human, but she swung it like a twig. It fits, Leona grunted, testing the armor's joints. She looked at Damien with fierce loyalty. It is strong like you. Damien smiled. He checked his system. DP 600, status dual-core stabilized, influence the black thread established. Barnaby Cypher, Damien addressed his new shadow commanders. I am leaving you here. Gravestone is now our base of operations. Use the gold. Buy the town if you have to, but keep it quiet. He tossed the void gem containing the majority of the loot to Barnaby. It was a massive amount of trust, but Damien wasn't worried. He raised his hand. The contract gem pulsed. I don't need to remind you what happens if you betray me. Barnaby and Cypher both knelt instantly, clutching their chests where the invisible link bound them. Our lives are yours, Cypher said. We will weave the web while you are gone. Good. When I return from the north, I expect to know the color of the second prince's underwear. With a final nod, Damien turned to his traveling party. Isabel, Lyra, Leona, pack up. We're leaving. To the Elven Empire, Lyra asked, hope rising in her voice. To the Elven Empire, Damien confirmed. But first, we have a trail to follow. Yeah. 2 days later, the northern road. The landscape had changed drastically. The lush forests of the Central Empire gave way to craggy, gray mountains and pine trees dusted with snow. The air was biting cold. The team moved fast. They had purchased a sturdy, reinforced carriage in gravestone, pulled by 4 frost-resistant horses. Leona drove the carriage, enjoying the cold wind, while the others sat inside. The atmosphere was tense. Lyra sat opposite Damien, her eyes fixed on the map spread out on the table between them. "We're moving too slow," Lyra muttered. "If the attack is timed with the Queen's labor, we might already be too late." "We aren't too late," Damien said calmly, reading the midnight tome. He was trying to refine his shadow control to match his new aura output. "The Queen isn't due for another week. We'll make it." "How can you be so sure?" Lyra snapped. "You seem to know everything, Voss. The dungeon, the Queen's pregnancy, the guild head secrets. Are you a seer?" Damien looked up. He saw the suspicion in her eyes. It was natural. He knew too much. "I'm not a seer, Lyra. I'm a pessimist. I plan for the worst-case scenario, and I gather information to prevent it." He leaned forward. "Speaking of worst-case scenarios, tell me about your heart." Lyra flinched. "My heart." "The dark elf curse," Damien said bluntly. "When an elf is consumed by hatred and despair, their mana corrupts. Their skin turns obsidian, their magic turns to void, and they lose their connection to nature." However, although he said this, Damien knew this wasn't 100% true, as she would need to delve into abyss magic to complete the transformation and become the first dark elf. But for the current Lyra, she didn't need to know that, and sure enough, hearing his words, she went silent. I felt it," she suddenly whispered, her voice shaking. "When I saw my squad in those cages, when I saw Kale branding them, I felt something snap. If you hadn't arrived, if you hadn't killed them, you would have turned," Damien finished for her. He wasn't just guessing. In the novel, Lyra of 1,000 Miles turned into a dark elf precisely because her squad was tortured to death while she watched helplessly from the shadows. Damien had just deleted her tragic backstory. "Hatred is a powerful fuel, Lyra," Damien said softly. "But it burns the engine. Don't let it consume you. You have your squad back. You have a mission." He pointed to Leona, whose silhouette was visible through the driver's window, and Isabel, who was dozing on his shoulder. "And you have us. The black thread isn't just a weapon, it's a shield." Lyra looked at him for a long time. The cold tension in her shoulders slowly relaxed. "You're a strange human, Damien Voss," she sighed. "You talk like a tyrant, act like a warlord, but you save people like a hero." "I'm not a hero," Damien smirked, closing his book. "Heroes have rules, I don't." Suddenly, the carriage jerked to a violent halt. "Nay!" The horses screamed in panic. Leona roared from the driver's seat. "Ambush!" Damien's eyes snapped open, the blue shifting to a mix of gold and black instantly. He kicked the carriage door open and leapt out, Isabel and Lyra right behind him. They were on a narrow mountain pass. The road ahead was blocked, not by fallen rocks but by wreckage. It was a massacre. A merchant caravan lay in ruins. Wagons were overturned and burning with a strange, pale blue fire. Bodies littered the snow, merchants, guards, and something else. Damien walked over to one of the corpses. It wasn't human. It was a beast man, similar to Leona but twisted. Its veins were black and its eyes were wide open in terror. "This wasn't bandits," Leona growled, sniffing the air. She pointed her greatsword at the burning blue fire. "That smells like sulfur and rot." Lyra knelt by a dead guard. She pulled a strange, jagged dagger out of the man's chest. "Damien," Lyra called out, her face pale. "Look at this." Damien took the dagger. It was made of a dark, bone-like metal, but what caught his eye was the symbol etched into the hilt. A crescent moon eclipsed by a jagged, bleeding sun. The symbol of the Twilight Association. "They were here," Damien said, his voice turning icy. Who? Isabel asked, sensing his mood shift. The Twilight Association, the cult that hunts abominations, Damien explained. He looked at the twisted beastman corpse. They aren't just moving troops, they are hunting. They're clearing the path to the elven border. He looked north. The tracks in the snow were fresh. A large force, dozens, maybe hundreds, had passed through here only hours ago. They are ahead of us, Damien realized. Garrick wasn't lying. The attack has already begun. They are moving to siege the elven capital. He crushed the bone dagger in his hand, his golden dragon aura flaring and turning the fragments to dust. Leona, get the carriage moving, full speed. We don't stop for sleep, we don't stop for food. Damien climbed back onto the carriage, his gaze fixed on the northern horizon where storm clouds were gathering. We have a war to catch. Carriage rumbled through the deepening shadows of the northern woodlands. The landscape here was different from the human empire. The trees were colossal, ancient redwoods and silverbarks that towered hundreds of feet into the air, their canopies blotting out most of the sun. The air was crisp and smelled of pine and old magic. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy. Damien sat with his arms crossed, eyes closed, his breathing rhythmic but shallow. To an observer, he looked asleep. In reality, he was walking a tightrope. He was circulating his mana and aura simultaneously, forcing two opposing power systems to coexist within his meridians. The dual-core state was powerful, but volatile. Every minute he held it was a minute his meridians screamed in protest. Stabilization is at 15%, he noted inwardly. If I push it to 100% output for more than 5 minutes, my body will tear itself apart. I need more endurance, or more DP. Opposite him, Lyra stared out the window. Every few miles, the once majestic scenery was destroyed by the Twilight Association's passage. A scorched clearing was where the Dryad Grove used to be. On the ground, slaughtered pack of monowolves lay listless. Wherever they passed, a symbol of the eclipse was deeply carved into the bark of every tree. They aren't just marching, Lyra whispered, her voice tight. They're purging. They are burning the roots of the forest as they go. Isabel, sitting next to Damien, flinched. She pulled her cloak tighter, trying to shrink into the seat. Isabel, Damien spoke without opening his eyes. Stop shaking. I can't help it, young master, Isabel stammered. This energy, the magic they left behind, it feels like it's directly aimed at me. Damien opened his eyes. The blue and gold heterochromia swirled. It's holy magic, Damien explained, or a twisted version of it. The Twilight Association worships purity. To them, anything mixed like half-demons or dragon beasts is a stain. Human supremacists, to be exact. He glanced at the driver's seat through the partition, where Leona was guiding the horses. Leona feels it too, but she channels it into rage. You channel it into fear, that's the difference. Looking at his loyal maid, Damien knew she still had a long way to go. Isabel looked down. I'm sorry, I just feel exposed here. You are, Lyra said bluntly. She turned from the window. The Twilight Inquisitors are trained to hunt the demons. Your concealment technique might fool normal mages, Isabel, but to them, you are a beacon. Isabel paled. However, Lyra continued, her tone softening, that is why we are here. You are the darkness, I am the nature, and he, she pointed at Damien. He is the calamity that eats them both. Damien smirked. High praise from someone who almost burned down a fortress with rage. Lyra looked away. Don't remind me, I almost lost myself. You were close, Damien pressed. He needed to understand this. Back at the fortress, you said you felt your heart snap. What happens exactly? Lyra sighed. Elves are born from the world tree. Our mana is pure life nature, but life has a shadow. When an elf is consumed by absolute despair, when we reject the world, our mana inverts. She held up her hand. Green wind mana swirled around her fingers. If I had turned, this wind wouldn't cut, and my mana heart would stop beating, the world tree would cut me off. She looked at Damien. You saved my squad. You stopped the despair, so thank you again. Damien waved his hand. No need for thanks, I prefer my allies sane. Suddenly the carriage swerved. Screech. Young master, Leona's roar came from the front. Roadblock. Damien kicked the door open before the carriage stopped. He leaped out onto the mossy forest floor, Isabel and Lyra flanking him. They weren't alone. Ahead, the ancient road was blocked by 5 figures in white robes trimmed with blood-red fabric. They wore featureless silver masks with the eclipse symbol. Twilight Inquisitors. Behind them was a massive, chained forest guardian bear, its fur matted, eyes glazed white, controlled by a glowing collar. Halt, the lead Inquisitor spoke, his voice metallic. This path is cleansed, no filth may pass. He turned his masked head directly toward Isabel. I smell sulfur, he said, drawing a jagged silver sword glowing with blinding white light. A demon hides in human skin. Isabel trembled. The light made her skin sizzle. Filth, the Inquisitor spat. Purge it. He pointed his sword. The 4 others raised their hands. A massive circle of white light seared the moss beneath Isabel's feet. Holy art, judgment chain. Chains of light erupted from the ground. Leona shield, Damien barked. Leona jumped from the driver's seat, slamming her massive shield down in front of Isabel. Clang! The chains wrapped around the shield, burning Leona's hands. It burns, Leona growled. Master, it ignores armor. It's conceptual magic, Damien analyzed. True damage to non-humans. Isabel, fire. Be but young master, what about Leona? Just do it, he yelled. Isabel screamed and unleashed a torrent of crimson flame. The Inquisitor leader didn't dodge. He raised his hand, and the white light swallowed the fire. Pathetic, such flames cannot touch the light of the twilight. He raised his sword to strike Leona. Is that so? A voice whispered right next to his ear. The Inquisitor froze. Damien was standing beside him, draped in the midnight tome's darkness. Light beats fire, Damien whispered, his hand coated in vibrating black mana. But do you know what beats light? Shadow art, black hole. Damien slammed his hand into the Inquisitor's chest. Crunch! The white light flickered and died, consumed by the vacuum. The Inquisitor's chest collapsed. Damien kicked the body away. Shadow beats light, Damien said coldly, because light cannot escape a black hole. The other 4 froze. Monster, one screamed, kill him. They unleashed the chained bear. Lyra the collar. Twang! An arrow sheared the collar. The bear stumbled, confused. Isabel, Damien commanded. Gravity pinned them. Isabel's fear turned to anger. Gravity down. Boom! The 4 Inquisitors were slammed face first into the earth. Damien walked up, golden aura flaring on his right side. You called her filth, Damien said. He raised his boot. You should look in a mirror. Stomp. Oh yeah. 10 minutes later. Damien wiped his blade. He checked the bodies. They were the rear guard, Damien said, reading a scroll found on the leader. He looked north, through the gaps in the giant trees where the sky was turning an ugly purple. The main Twilight army has reached the border, Damien said. They are sieging the elven capital. We can't drive in, Leona said. We ride, Damien said, unhitching the horses, fast and hard. He looked at Isabel. You okay? Yes, young master, she whispered. Damien mounted his horse. Trust me, everyone, we don't have much time to waste. He pointed his sword north. To the border. Journey to the border was a blur of speed and anxiety. Leona pushed the frost horses to their absolute limit. their hooves thundering against the ancient, moss-covered road. The deeper they went into the forest, the heavier the air became. It wasn't just mana, it was killing intent. "We're close," Lyra said, her hand gripping her bow so tight her knuckles were white. "The outer perimeter is just ahead. If the Twilight Association has pushed this far, the guards will be on a hair trigger." Damien nodded, checking his condition. Mana 80%, aura 90%, dual core stability 20%. "I can fight if I have to," Damien thought, his eyes narrowing. "But fighting the elves right now would be stupid. I need them to trust me, not try to kill me." "Isabel," Damien said, "keep your hood up. Do not use your gravity unless I say so. Your energy signature is exactly what they are hunting." "Yes, young master," Isabel whispered from beneath her thick cloak. She was trembling again, not from fear, but from the oppressive, wholly aligned barrier that covered the elven lands. To a half-demon, the very air here tasted like poison. "Screech!" Leona pulled the reins hard, bringing the carriage to a sliding stop. "Halt!" A voice clear and sharp as a whip echoed from the trees. In an instant the forest came alive. From the branches, the bushes, and the shadows of the massive redwoods, dozens of figures emerged. They were clad in shimmering silver leaf armor, their bows drawn and aimed directly at the carriage. "Elven sentinels." "Step out of the vehicle, slowly," the captain commanded. He was tall, with long blonde hair and eyes that looked like chips of ice. The arrow nocked in his bow was glowing with dangerous nature magic. Damien kicked the door open and stepped out, hands raised but relaxed. Lyra and Isabel followed close behind. The moment they stepped into the light, the atmosphere froze. The captain's eyes locked onto Isabel, his nostrils flared. "Demon," he hissed. Twang! Dozens of bowstrings tightened in unison. The killing intent spiked so high it felt like a physical weight. "A human, a traitor, and a demon spawn," the captain spat, looking at Lyra with disgust. "The Twilight dogs are getting desperate with their spies. Do they think we wouldn't smell the abyss on her?" "Wait." "Captain," Lyra stepped forward, pulling down her hood. "I am Lyra, squad leader of the 7th Ranging Corps. I was sent to—" "Lyra," the captain sneered. "The 7th Squad was wiped out weeks ago. If you are alive, it is because you turned, traitor." He raised his hand. "Execute them." "You dare." Boom! Damien stepped forward. He didn't use a spell. He didn't use his sword. He simply released his aura. Not the golden dragon aura. That would be too aggressive. He released the Voss family aura. A cold, suffocating darkness that rolled out like a tide, swallowing the killing intent of the elves. The horses whinnied in fear. The elven guards flinched, their arrows wavering. "You call us spies," Damien laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "If I wanted to kill you, you wouldn't even know I was here." He looked at the captain with eyes that swirled with blue and black. "I am Damien Voss, heir to the Voss family, son of Thuron Voss." The captain paused. The name Voss clearly meant something to him. Fear flickered in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by stubborn anger. "The King of Darkness," the captain scoffed, though his grip on the bow loosened slightly. "We sent a messenger to him weeks ago. He never answered. The humans have abandoned us. Why should we believe a child?" "Because that child is holding this." Damien reached into his shirt. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out the silver necklace his father had given him. As he infused a tiny bit of mana into it, the black gem at its center flared. A projection appeared, a simple, shadowy crest of a black sun. But it wasn't just a visual. A specific, terrifyingly powerful mana signature washed over the clearing. It was the signature of a man who had once fought side by side with their queen. The signature of the King of Darkness. Thud! The captain dropped his bow. The other guards lowered their weapons. their eyes wide with shock and recognition. "That Mana," the captain whispered, his face paling. "It's him." "My father couldn't come," Damien said, his voice steady and authoritative. "He is fighting his own war to keep the Twilight Association off your backs, so he sent me." Thinking of their current situation, Damien decided to tell a small lie to gain their recognition faster. Fortunately, it seemed to work. Putting away the necklace, the pressure vanished instantly. "Now," Damien said, crossing his arms, "are you going to keep pointing arrows at your reinforcements, or are you going to let us in?" The captain swallowed hard. He looked at Isabel again. The hatred was still there, but now it was mixed with fear. If this boy was Thuron's son and he brought a demon, then it wasn't a spy, it was a weapon. "Open the blockade," the captain yelled, stepping aside. "Escort them to the capital. The Queen must know of this." The guards scrambled to move the heavy wooden barricades. "Get in," Damien ordered his team. As the carriage rolled past the stunned elves, Lyra let out a breath she had been holding for minutes. "You're crazy," she muttered, looking at Damien. "You terrified them. They're supposed to be our allies." "Fear is a better motivator than trust right now," Damien said, leaning back and closing his eyes. "Besides," he thought, "if they knew I was broke on DP and barely holding this dual core together, they wouldn't be scared. They'd be laughing." The carriage picked up speed, leaving the forest outpost behind. 10 minutes later, the trees thinned out. "Young master," Isabel whispered, staring out the window. Damien looked. Ahead of them, rising from a massive valley, was the elven capital. It was a city built into the roots and branches of trees the size of skyscrapers, glowing with bioluminescent lights. But the lights were flickering. In the sky above the city, a massive, translucent green barrier was visible. But outside the barrier, streaks of purple and black magic were hammering against it like rain. Boom, boom. Distant explosions rocked the ground. Smoke rose from the outer districts. The siege wasn't starting. It was already halfway done. "The barrier is failing," Damien said grimly, seeing the cracks in the green light. "We're just in time." Boom! Another explosion rocked the earth, sending a tremor through the wheels of the carriage as it rolled through the massive, vine-covered gates of the elven capital. "The barrier is at 60%, Lyra whispered, her eyes fixed on the sky through the window. "At this rate, those Twilight bastards will break through before midnight." Hearing this, Damien looked up. Above the towering, bioluminescent trees that served as the city's buildings, a massive dome of translucent green light shimmered. But it wasn't the healthy, vibrant green described in the novel. It was pale, flickering like a dying light bulb every time a streak of purple magic slammed into it from the outside. In the original story, the capital fell because the barrier was sabotaged from the inside, Damien recalled, his eyes narrowing. But this is a brute force siege. The timeline has changed far beyond what I expected. "Leona, keep moving," Damien ordered. "Don't stop for anything." The city itself was a masterpiece of nature. Magic bridges woven from living vines connecting tree towers the size of skyscrapers, glowing moss lighting the streets, and waterfalls cascading from the upper branches. But now it was a city of fear. The streets were empty of civilians. Elven squads ran back and forth, carrying supplies and wounded soldiers. The air smelled of ozone and burnt leaves. "It's so quiet," Isabel murmured, her hand instinctively gripping the hem of her maid dress. "Young master, where is everyone?" "Hiding," Damien said grimly, "praying." He looked at the central spire of the city, the World Tree. It dwarfed everything else, a colossal trunk that seemed to pierce the clouds. That was the palace. That was where the Queen was. And that was where the real danger lay. "Halt!" The carriage slowed as they reached the inner sanctum's gate. This wasn't a wooden barricade like the border. This was a wall of solid, white crystal. A squad of royal guards, wearing armor far heavier and more ornate than the border sentries, blocked the path. Their spears were leveled, glowing with dangerous, high-density mana. "State your business," the royal guard captain barked. He looked exhausted, his eyes rimmed with red, likely from days of sleepless defense. Damien didn't argue this time. Rather, he simply held out the silver necklace. And the captain, the moment he saw the Voss crest glowing with Thuron's signature mana, his aggressive stance vanished, replaced by shock. "The King of Darkness," the captain gasped. He looked at the carriage, hope warring with confusion. He actually came. "He sent his heir," Lyra called out from the carriage, showing her face. "I am Ranger Captain Lyra. I have returned with reinforcements. Open the gate. The Queen must be informed immediately." The captain hesitated, glancing at the reinforcements. A single carriage. But the aura radiating from the necklace was undeniable. "Open the crystal gate," he shouted. "Escort them to the throne room. Hurry." The massive crystal doors slid open silently. The World Tree throne room entrance. The inside of the World Tree was hollowed out into a magnificent hall of amber and wood, but Damien didn't have time to admire the architecture. The moment they stepped out of the carriage, the pressure in the air multiplied. "This pressure," Leona growled, her fur standing on end. "It feels like the air is heavy." "It's the Queen," Damien said, adjusting his cuffs. "She's a peak 7th Order mage bordering on 8th, and right now she's agitated." "And pregnant," he added silently, "which makes her volatile." "Isabel," Damien whispered, "stay close. Do not, and I mean do not release your aura unless I tell you to. If the Queen senses your demon blood, she might attack first and ask questions later." "I'll try, young master," Isabel gulped, retracting her presence as much as possible. Two massive wooden doors, carved with the history of the elves, swung open before them. Damien walked in first, his steps echoing on the polished wood floor. The throne room was vast, lit by floating orbs of sunlight. At the far end, seated on a throne made of living roots, was Queen Aelinor. She was beautiful, with flowing golden hair that touched the floor and eyes the color of spring leaves. But her face was pale, drawn with pain and exhaustion. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen stomach. Surrounding her were a dozen elite guards and several high-ranking advisors, all of whom looked tense. When Damien entered, the room fell silent. The Queen's eyes scanned him. She looked at Lyra, she looked at Leona. And then her gaze landed on Isabel. Zoom! The temperature in the room dropped to freezing. The vines on the throne writhed like snakes. "Thuron Voss." The Queen's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a storm. "You foolish, arrogant man." She slowly stood up, ignoring the advisors who tried to help her. Her eyes, now glowing with intense, dangerous mana, locked onto Damien. "I asked for help, I asked for an army, and instead—" She pointed a trembling finger at Isabel. "He sends a child and a demon." Boom! A wave of green mana exploded from the throne, cracking the floorboards and rushing toward Damien's group like a tidal wave. "Protect the young master," Leona roared, stepping forward with her shield. "Wait," Lyra shouted. Damien didn't move. He didn't flinch. He stared directly at the angry Queen. "3rd Order versus 7th Order. If this hits, we die." "But she won't hit." "Auntie Aelinor," Damien shouted, using a name no one else dared to use. "Is this how you treat your nephew on his first visit?" The green mana wave stopped inches from his nose. The wind from the spell blew his silver hair back, but he didn't blink. The Queen froze. The anger in her eyes flickered, replaced by a sudden flash of nostalgia. She looked at his silver hair. She looked at his blue eyes. "A nephew," she whispered. She slumped back onto the throne, the mana dissipating. She let out a long, weary sigh that sounded like the creaking of an old branch. "You have his eyes," she muttered, rubbing her temples, "and his reckless tongue." She looked at Isabel again. The hostility was still there, but it was restrained. "Explain yourself, boy, before I decide that purging the demon standing next to you is worth starting a war with your father. Explain yourself, boy, before I decide that purging the demon standing next to you is worth starting a war with your father." Queen Eleanor's voice was calm, but the mana in the room was boiling. The wooden floorboards groaned under the pressure of her seventh-order aura. Behind Damien, Leona growled low in her throat, her hand inching toward her greatsword. Isabel was trembling, her instincts screaming that the woman in front of them was a natural predator to her kind. Damien, however, just dusted off his shoulder where the wind pressure had ruffled his cloak. "Explain," Damien chuckled, though his internal monologue was screaming. "Damn, she's even stronger than in the novel. If she attacks now, even with dual core, I'm dead in 3 seconds. I have to talk fast." "Auntie Eleanor," Damien said, stepping forward boldly. "I didn't bring a demon to attack you. I brought her to save you." "Save me?" the queen scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "From what? The Twilight Association outside my walls. Do you think an elf queen needs the help of an abomination to fight humans?" "Not just humans," Damien corrected. He lowered his voice. "I'm talking about the demon general who is waiting for you to go into labor." The room went dead silent. The queen's eyes widened. The advisors behind her gasped. "How?" Eleanor's voice wavered for the first time. "How do you know about that?" "My father isn't the only one with secrets," Damien bluffed smoothly. "I know the prophecy. The moment the royal heir is born, the barrier will fluctuate. And in that moment, the void demon god will send his 12th general, Charon the Undying, to kill the child." He pointed at her swollen stomach. "I'm here to stop that," he said, his mind going through some parts of the novel he had forgotten. Indeed, there was such a prophecy in the original novel. It's also why the elf queen was able to make preparations beforehand, allowing her newborn daughter and future heroine to escape at the cost of her life. Muttering inwardly, Damien just hoped that his words had some effect. After all, the prophecy was something that she alone, as the elf queen, was meant to know, as she received it in a dream. Luckily, after waiting for this, Eleanor suddenly paused. The queen stared at him. The hostility slowly drained from her face, replaced by a weary, desperate hope. She slumped back onto her living wood throne, wincing as a contraction hit her. "Thuron," she whispered, "he always knew too much." She looked at Isabel again. This time there was no killing intent, just calculation. "A half-demon fighting against a demon general, it's poetic, I suppose," she sighed. "Fine, I will trust you, nephew, but if she loses control, my guards will put her down. Am I clear?" "Crystal," Damien nodded. "Then speak," the queen commanded. "You didn't come all this way just out of the goodness of your heart. Thuron Voss doesn't raise philanthropists. What do you want?" Damien's expression turned serious. This was it. "I need the tears of the goddess of life," he said, thinking that this was his chance. If he were able to get it, not only would his physique be able to properly use both aura and mana, but the rest should be able to heal Thuron's hand a bit, even if not completely. Unfortunately, things aren't going to be that easy. The reaction was immediate. The advisors shouted in outrage. "Insolence! That is the Empire's most sacred treasure. How dare a human ask for the tears?" The queen raised her hand, silencing them. She looked at Damien with a sad, pitying smile. "You want the tears," she said softly. "I assume, is it for Thuron, his arm?" Remembering the news on her old friend, he indeed needed it. Damien nodded. "The void mark is eating him alive. Only the tears can purify it." "I see." Eleanor closed her eyes. A single tear leaked out, but it was just salt water, not the crystal gem he needed. I would give them to you, Damien, truly. For Thuron I would give anything. She opened her eyes. They were filled with pain. But I can't. Why? Damien asked, his heart sinking. The treasury. It's not in the treasury, the queen snapped, her voice cracking. The tears of the goddess aren't an item we store, Damien. They are manifested. Legend says they can only be cried by a virgin queen in a moment of pure sorrow or joy. A maiden whose sole purpose is to serve the goddess of life and guard the world tree. She gestured to her pregnant belly with a bitter laugh. Look at me, boy. Do I look like a virgin to you? Boom. Damien's mind went blank. What? Wait. In the novel, the protagonist got the tears from the queen, but that was much later. Was she not the mother? He looked at the queen, then at her stomach. The gears in his head spun wildly. The virgin queen, pure lineage, connected to the world tree. His eyes widened as realization hit him like a truck. The princess, Damien whispered. The queen froze. She looked at him, her face pale. Yes, she whispered back. She's the only one who can create the tears. She cradled her stomach protectively. My daughter, she is the one the world tree has chosen. She is the one with the pure connection. The moment she is born, her first cry, her first tears. Those will be the tears of the goddess, Damien finished. The gravity of the situation crashed down on him. He didn't just need to defend the city. He didn't just need to kill a demon general. He had to be in the delivery room. He had to catch the very first tears of a newborn baby while an army of undead tried to kill her. So, Damien said, letting out a long, shaky breath, I have to deliver a baby in the middle of a war zone. Essentially, the queen grimaced, gripping the armrest as another contraction hit her hard. Arg! Your Majesty, the advisors rushed forward. It's time, the queen gasped, sweat beading on her forehead. The baby, she's coming. W-O-O-O-O. Outside, a massive, mournful horn blast echoed across the city. Lyra rushed to the window. Damien, look. Damien ran to the balcony. The green barrier in the sky was flickering violently. Outside, the purple mana of the Twilight Association was no longer hitting random spots. It was concentrating on a single point directly above the palace. And in the shadows of the city streets, black portals were beginning to swirl open. They know, Damien realized. They know she's going into labor. The barrier is tied to her life force. It's weakening. He turned back to his team. Isabel, Leona, Lyra, battle stations. He looked at the queen, who was being carried toward the inner chambers by her healers. Lyra, go to the high tower. Anything that flies, shoot it down. On it, Lyra sprinted out. Leona, hold the main door. Nothing gets through. I don't care if it's a zombie or a dragon. You stop it. My shield is ready, Leona roared, slamming her visor down. Isabel, Damien said, walking up to her. He grabbed her shoulders. You're with me. We're guarding the queen personally. And me, Isabel stuttered. But. No buts, Damien shouted, his eyes glowing blue and gold. The thing coming for that baby is a demon general. None of us can afford to falter. He pulled out his sword. Her labor has started, and so has the war. Crash. With a loud crash, the green barrier finally shattered like glass. Crash. The sound of the great barrier shattering wasn't just a noise. It was a physical blow to the soul of every elf in the city. Shards of green mana rained down from the sky like broken glass, dissolving into motes of light before they hit the ground. Unfortunately, the purple fire raining down behind them didn't dissolve. Boom, boom, boom. The outer districts of the elven capital instantly turned into a sea of flames. Go, Damien shouted, his voice cutting through the panic in the throne room. Lyra, Leona, you have your orders. Don't let them reach the world tree. On it, Lyra didn't look back. She sprinted toward the spiral stairs leading to the high canopy, her mana bow already forming in her hand. "I will be the wall," Leona roared, slamming her helmet visor down. She charged toward the main entrance, her massive shield glowing with aura. Damien turned to Isabel. She was staring at the crumbling sky, her pupils trembling. The chaotic mixture of holy magic from the Twilight Association and the dark, abyssal mana beginning to leak from the portals was overwhelming her senses. "Isabel, eyes on me." Damien grabbed her shoulder. She gasped, snapping out of her trance. "Young master, the air, it tastes like blood." "It's about to get worse. Stay focused. We are the last line of defense." Saying this, Damien dragged her toward the inner sanctum. "Oh, yeah." The queen's bedchamber. The room was a masterpiece of nature magic. Walls woven from living vines, glowing flowers providing soft light, and a massive bed made of white wood. But right now it smelled of sweat, fear, and iron. Queen Aelinor lay on the bed, writhing in pain. Her golden hair was matted to her forehead. 3 high-ranking elven healers were hovering over her, their hands glowing green, trying to stabilize her erratic life force. "The baby, the mana is too strong," one healer cried out. "It's rejecting our healing. The child is siphoning the queen's life force to protect itself." "Hold her down," the head healer shouted. Damien kicked the door shut behind him and Isabel. He quickly scanned the room. 1 door, 2 windows overlooking the city, 5 healers, the queen. "Isabel," Damien said calmly, ignoring the screams from the bed. "Stand by the window. If anything tries to come in, bird, bat, or shadow, you burn it." "Yes, young master." Isabel took her position, her hands igniting with crimson fire. Damien walked to the center of the room. He closed his eyes and expanded his mana sense, pushing it to the limit with his midnight tome. The barrier is gone. The city is in chaos. The Twilight Association will use this confusion to send in their elite assassins. They won't fight Leona at the front gate. They'll teleport directly here. He didn't have to wait long. F-whip. A nearly silent sound, like cloth tearing. From the shadows cast by the healers, 3 figures emerged. They wore the sleek, black bodysuits of the Twilight Assassins, their daggers glowing with the sickly green of anti-regeneration poison. "Die, abomination spawn," the lead assassin hissed, lunging for the queen's exposed stomach. The healers screamed, too slow to react. But Damien had been waiting. Dual art, golden shadow bind. He didn't move his feet, he simply stomped. Clang! Golden chains, forged from his aura, erupted from the floor, wrapping around the assassin's legs. Simultaneously, black spikes shot out from their own shadows, impaling their arms. Arg, the assassins froze mid-lunge, trapped. "You called her an abomination," Damien said, walking up to the lead assassin. His right eye glowed gold, his left eye void black. "But you're the ones trying to kill an unborn baby." He placed his hand on the assassin's head. Gravity crush. Isabel didn't even need to turn around. She snapped her fingers from the window. Squelch. The 3 assassins were instantly flattened into the floorboards, their bones pulverized by a sudden, localized gravity field. Damien kicked the remains aside. He looked at the terrified healers. "Focus on the queen," he ordered coldly. "I'll handle the trash." "Ooh, yeah." 20 minutes later. The room was quiet again, except for the queen's labored breathing. The initial wave of assassins had been dealt with. Damien leaned against the doorframe, wiping blood off his sword. He looked over at Isabel. She was still staring out the window at the burning city, her back stiff. "Isabel," Damien said softly. She didn't turn. "Young master, am I making it worse?" "What do you mean?" "The queen," she whispered. "She's in pain because the baby is reacting to the dark mana in the air. My mana. Even though I'm suppressing it, I'm a half-demon. Just being in this room, am I hurting the princess? She turned to him, tears welling up in her ruby-red eyes. Maybe I should go outside. Maybe Leona should be here. I'm poison to them. Damien walked over to her. He stood beside her at the window, looking out at the apocalypse unfolding below. Do you see that fire out there? Damien pointed to the purple flames of the Twilight Army. That's holy fire. It's burning the elves alive. He pointed to the black smoke rising from the lower districts where the demon cult was summoning undead. That's abyssal magic. It's rotting the trees. Looking closely, although they claim to be pure, but aren't the demonic cults and the Twilight Army attacking together? However, that's not what I wanted to show you. Look. He turned to Isabel and took her hand. Her skin was hot to the touch, buzzing with energy. Power isn't good or evil, Isabel. It's just a tool. Yes, you have demon blood. Yes, your aura is terrifying. He squeezed her hand. But right now, your terrifying aura is the only thing keeping the real monsters away. You aren't poison. You're the antidote. Isabel looked at him, her lip quivering. The antidote. You're the only one strong enough to scare them, Damien smiled. So stop doubting yourself. Stand tall. When that demon general gets here, I need you to look him in the eye and show him who the real monster is. Isabel sniffled, then wiped her eyes. She took a deep breath. The red glow in her eyes stabilized, burning with a fierce resolve instead of fear. Yes, young master, I will be the monster you need. WOOM. Suddenly, the air pressure in the room dropped. The sound of the battle outside vanished, replaced by a suffocating silence. The healers stopped moving. The queen gasped, her eyes snapping open wide. It's here, Eleanor wheezed. Damien spun around. He looked out the window. The moon, which had been hidden by smoke, suddenly broke through the clouds. But it wasn't white. It wasn't even the pale yellow of the harvest moon. It was blood red. And standing in the center of the blood-red moon, floating high above the city like a god of death, was a figure draped in tattered gray robes, holding a staff made of a dragon's spine. Charon the Undying. He's here, Damien said, his grip on his sword tightening until his knuckles turned white. System alert, major plot event detected, the descent of the 12th General, warning, enemy power level peak 7th order / pseudo 8 order. Survival chance, 5%. Damien smirked. 5%, I like those odds, woo-woo-woom. The blood moon pulsed. High above the burning city, Charon the Undying didn't rush. He didn't scream. He simply floated downward, his tattered gray robes billowing around him like smoke. He looked less like a warrior and more like a natural disaster. A child, Charon's voice echoed, not from his mouth but from the air itself, vibrating in Damien's bones. And a mongrel. He pointed his dragon-spine staff at the world tree. The master desires the seed, all else is dust. Tap. He tapped his staff against the air. Boom. A massive, concentric ring of gray necrosis magic expanded from his position. It washed over the upper branches of the world tree. Instantly, the vibrant, glowing leaves turned gray and crumbled to ash. The wood rotted. The bioluminescent lights died. The rot was spreading downward, straight toward the queen's chamber. He's rotting the tree, Lyra screamed from the high tower. She fired a volley of wind arrows, but they dissolved into dust before they even touched Charon's shield. Isabel, Damien shouted, shield. Isabel didn't hesitate. She stepped onto the balcony, her eyes blazing ruby red. Firewall. She threw her hands up. A massive curtain of crimson hellfire erupted, forming a barrier between the rotting spell and the queen's room. Hiss. The gray rot collided with the demon fire. The sound was like screaming metal. The rot ate the fire, but the fire burned the rot. It was a stalemate, but Isabel was shaking. "He's strong, young master," she gritted out, sweat pouring down her face. "His mana, it feels like an ocean. I'm just a pond." "Hold it," Damien ordered, his mind racing. "Peak 7th order, maybe pseudo-8. This isn't a fight I can win with brute force. My dual core is powerful, but I only have 500 DP. I can't afford a long battle." "System scan weakness." Scanning target, Charon the Undying. Weakness, none found in current state. Target is a lick-type entity. Physical body is a construct. True core is hidden. "Great, a boss with no weak point," Damien muttered. "Just what I needed." But before he could formulate a plan, a new sound cut through the chaos. Ding, ding, ding. It wasn't a notification from his system. It was the Voss family emergency transmission stone in his pocket, the one he had linked to his mother's communication crystal before he left. It was glowing a frantic, pulsing red. Red, that's the highest priority, that means. Damien pulled the stone out. A shaky, corrupted voice message projected into his mind. It wasn't Elizabeth, it was Elder Magnus. "Young master," coughed the barrier shattered. "The second prince he brought, the Twilight High Priests, 3/8 orders. The Patriarch, he's losing control. The void, it's eating him. We can't hold them back, you must." Static. The transmission cut off. Damien froze. The world seemed to stop. 3/8 orders. The void mark consuming Thuron. The barrier shattered. His father was dying, right now. If he left now, if he used the shadow medallion to teleport out of here, he might make it. He might be able to use his 500 DP to stall the void mark, or use his dual core to surprise the attackers. But if he left... Arg! Behind him, Queen Eleanor screamed. A pulse of raw life magic exploded from her body, cracking the bed frame. "The baby," the healer shouted. "She's coming, the mana backlash is killing the queen." If he left now, the queen would die. The princess, the only source of the tears that could save Thuron and help him master his two abilities, would die, and Charon would rot the world tree to nothing. Choice, Damien thought, his grip on his sword tightening until the leather creaked. This is forcing me to make a choice. Save my father now and lose the cure, or save the cure and risk my father dying before I get back. "Young master," Isabel looked back at him, sensing his turmoil. Her fire shield was flickering. "What do we do?" Damien looked at the red stone in his hand. He looked at Charon descending from the sky. He remembered his vow. "I'm a greedy king, I don't choose." He crushed the transmission stone in his hand. "We fight," Damien said, his voice low and terrifying. He looked up at Charon, his eyes snapped, the blue vanished. Left eye abyssal black, right eye dragon gold. The air around him exploded. The dual-core state erupted. Golden lightning arced from his right shoulder. Black mist poured from his left. "Isabel," Damien commanded, stepping onto the balcony rail. "Drop the shield." "What but the rot?" "Drop it, and focus everything you have on gravity." Damien pointed his sword at the Lick General. "He wants to rot the tree, fine, let's bring him down to the roots." Gravity, singularity. Isabel trusted him. She dropped the firewall and clapped her hands together. Boom! A massive purple sphere of gravity appeared directly on top of Charon. The Lick, who had been floating arrogantly, suddenly dropped like a stone. "Insolent," Charon hissed, raising his staff to counter the spell. But he wasn't ready for the second hit. Damien launched himself off the balcony. He didn't fly. He used Shadow Step to teleport directly into the gravity field. Dual Art, Golden Dragon Claw. Damien appeared above the falling Lick. His right arm was coated in a massive, spectral dragon claw made of golden aura. He swung down. Crash! He smashed Charon directly into the roof of the lower palace. Tiles shattered. Wood splintered. The 7th Order Demon General was spiked into the ground like a volleyball. Damien landed on a gargoyle, panting, his mana veins burning. "One hit," Damien growled. "I have to finish this fast, Dad, hold on." From the cloud of dust below, a cold, dry laughter echoed. He heavy, very heavy. Charon rose from the rubble. His robes were torn, but his skeletal body was unharmed. A green, ghostly shield flickered around him. But Charon pointed his staff at Damien. "You are still just a child." Womb. The dust around Charon turned into green, spectral skulls. Hundreds of them. They screamed, flying toward Damien. "Round 2, Damien spat, readying his sword. "Isabel, don't stop the pressure." Hundreds of green, spectral skulls screamed through the air, their jaws snapping with the hunger of the void. They swarmed like locusts, aiming not just for Damien, but for the gap in the wall behind him, the Queen's chamber. Annoying, Damien spat. Standing his ground, he spun his sword, the blade coating itself in the thick, black smoke of the Voss family magic. "Shadow art, 1,000 needles." He thrust his hand forward. The shadows cast by the balcony railing suddenly elongated, turning into a barrage of razor-sharp spikes that intercepted the skulls midair. Pop, pop, pop. The skulls exploded on impact, releasing clouds of corrosive green gas. "Isabel, fire!" Damien shouted, jumping back to avoid the acid mist. "On it!" Isabel, standing at the threshold of the shattered window, clapped her hands. A wave of crimson hellfire rolled out, instantly incinerating the gas. The clash of demon fire and necrosis magic created a smell like burning sulfur and rotten meat. Good reflexes." Charon's dry voice floated up from the courtyard. The demon general was hovering again. His tattered robes were mending themselves, knitting together with visible threads of green mana. "But can you stop the ocean with a bucket?" Charon raised his dragonspine staff high. The ruby at its tip pulsed with a sickening, rhythmic light. "Awaken!" Rumble! The ground of the elven capital shook. Damien watched in horror as the earth in the garden districts cracked open, but the destruction went far beyond the terrain. It was the bodies. The ones the Twilight Inquisitors had killed. The elven guards who had died in the initial bombardment. Even the ancient bones of beasts buried deep beneath the world tree's roots. They all stood up. Flesh knitted back onto bone. Eyes glowed with the same sickly green light as Charon's staff. "No way!" Lyra's voice came over the wind, trembling. She was perched on the high spire looking down at the city. "Damien, the whole lower district, it's moving. There are thousands of them." "A necromancer," Damien gritted his teeth. "Of course the 12th General is a necromancer, stupid author." In the novel, Charon was a late-game raid boss who drowned entire kingdoms in zombies. Damien hadn't expected to fight him solo at level 12. "This isn't a duel anymore, it's a siege." "Kill them," Charon commanded lazily, pointing his staff at the world tree. Roar! The undead horde surged forward. It was a tidal wave of rotting flesh and bone, scrambling up the roots of the world tree, climbing the vines, clawing their way toward the Queen. "Leona," Damien yelled into his communication stone. "Status." "Busy," Leona's voice roared back, accompanied by the sound of heavy metal smashing bone. "The front gate is swarmed. I'm holding them, but there are too many. They don't feel pain." "Just hold the line, don't let them flank us." Damien looked at Charon. The lick was floating higher, gathering mana for another massive spell. He was ignoring Damien, focusing entirely on breaking the tree. "He knows I can't protect the Queen and fight him at the same time. He's forcing me to play defense." "Smart bastard," Damien muttered. His dual core was humming, the golden aura burning his skin. He had about 10 minutes before the backlash started to tear his muscles apart. "Isabel." "Yes, young master." Isabel was pale, her hands trembling as she maintained the fire barrier. The sheer amount of death mana in the air was making her demon blood boil. "I'm going to clear the sky," Damien said, his eyes flashing gold and black. "You keep the floor clean. If a single zombie gets into that room—" "They won't," Isabel promised, her eyes narrowing. "I'll burn them to ash." "Good." Damien crouched, the golden aura intensified, concentrating around his legs. Boom! He launched himself into the air, shattering the gargoyle he was standing on. He shot straight up, intercepting Charon's ascent. "You again," Charon sighed, bored. He waved his hand, summoning a bone shield. "Me again." Bypassing the shield entirely, Damien used Shadow Step in midair, teleporting behind the lick. Dual Art Golden Hammer. He clasped his hands together, wreathed in the heavy, crushing aura of the golden dragon, and swung them down like a sledgehammer. Crack! He smashed Charon out of the sky. The lick plummeted, crashing through the branches of the world tree and slamming into the main plaza below. Damien landed gracefully on a lower branch, panting. "Physical attacks work, but he heals too fast. I need to destroy his core, but where is it? System, where is his phylactery? Scan failed. Target is shielded by high-tier divinity. Useless system, I want a refund," he yelled, forgetting that this time the system hadn't charged him. Below him, Charon rose from the crater again. His head was twisted at an unnatural angle, but he simply snapped it back into place with a wet crack. "You possess the aura of a dragon," Charon observed, his voice sounding amused. "And the shadow of a rat, interesting mixture but meaningless." He slammed his staff into the ground. Bone prison. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Massive, sharp ribs erupted from the plaza floor, shooting upward hundreds of feet, aiming to impale Damien on the branch. Damien jumped, dodging one spike then another. He was dancing in the air, a blur of gold and black. But while he was distracted, the undead horde was climbing. "Young master, above you," Lyra shouted. Damien looked up. A flock of undead gargoyles, corrupted statues from the city's architecture, were diving toward the queen's balcony. And unfortunately, at this time, he was too far away. Thankfully, at the last moment before they could get there, a familiar voice rang out. "I got them." Whoosh! From the balcony, a massive gravitational field expanded. Isabel stepped out, her horns fully visible, her face twisted in concentration. Gravity down. The flock of gargoyles instantly lost their buoyancy. They smashed into the side of the world tree, shattering into gravel. "Good girl," Damien grinned. But his smile faded instantly. "Arg!" A scream tore from the queen's chamber. A pulse of life mana so pure it was visible as a white ripple exploded outward. Instantly, with its appearance, the situation on the battlefield changed. As it washed over the undead, zombies hissed, their skin burning. Even Charon flinched, shielding his eyes. "The child," Charon hissed, his amusement vanishing. "It is coming." The lick looked at Damien. For the first time, there was urgency in his hollow eyes. "Playtime is over." Charon raised his staff. The green gem shattered. Summoning Art Bone Dragon. The earth of the plaza exploded. A massive skeletal claw the size of a carriage burst from the ground. Then a skull. Then wings made of tattered shadow. A fifth-order undead dragon crawled out of the earth, roaring a soundless scream that shattered windows across the city. Damien felt the pressure. It was suffocating. A fifth-order summon, on top of a seventh-order lick, that's cheating. The bone dragon looked up. Ignoring Damien, the beast locked its gaze onto the balcony, at Isabel, at the queen. It opened its mouth, green fire gathering in its throat. "Oh shit," Damien cursed. He looked at his DP, 500. He looked at the dragon. He looked at the distance between him and the balcony. "I can't block that breath, not with my current strength." System, Damien screamed in his mind. Spend it, all of it. Give me a skill that can stop a dragon. Processing. 500 DP accepted. Editing skill, gravity manipulation shared. Temporary upgrade, singularity. Isabel, Damien shouted, his voice amplified by aura. Catch. He threw his hand out, channeling raw system energy through their contract bond, a power not of her blood, but of his own making. Isabel's eyes widened as she felt the surge. Use it, Damien roared. Crush that lizard. The bone dragon fired. A beam of green necrosis flame shot toward the balcony. Isabel screamed, thrusting both hands forward. Gravity singularity. VOOM. A black sphere, no larger than a marble, appeared in the path of the dragon fire. The green fire hit the sphere and vanished, sucked in. The sphere expanded. It pulled the air, it pulled the light, it pulled the dragon's head. Crack! The bone dragon's neck snapped forward, dragged by an infinite mass. The breath weapon exploded inside its own throat. Boom! The dragon's head was blown apart from the inside. The massive skeletal body collapsed, crashing against the base of the world tree. Isabel collapsed, unconscious, drained of every drop of mana. Damien landed on the balcony, catching her before she hit the floor. He was panting, his vision swimming. DP 0. Mana 10%. Aura 10%. He looked down at the plaza. Charon was still standing there. He looked at his destroyed bone dragon. Then he looked up at Damien. The lick began to clap. Clap, clap, clap. Impressive, Charon said. Truly, you killed my pet. He began to float upward, rising toward the balcony level. But now you're out of tricks. Charon raised a finger. A simple, condensed bullet of green magic formed at the tip. Die. Bang. The green magic bullet fired from Charon's finger was small, no larger than a marble. It didn't look like much compared to the bone dragon or the rotting wave. But Damien's instinct screamed death. He didn't try to block. He didn't try to deflect. He threw himself sideways, grabbing the unconscious Isabel and rolling across the balcony floor. His crack. The bullet struck the stone pillar where Damien had been standing a fraction of a second ago. There was no explosion. The pillar simply vanished. The stone turned gray, crumbled into dust, and then the dust rotted into nothingness. Decay magic, Damien gritted his teeth, dragging Isabel behind a tipped-over table. Concentrated decay. One hit and I'm gone. He checked his status. DP 0. Mana empty. Aura fumes. Dual-core state collapsed. He was back to being a regular third-order mage with a fancy title and an empty tank. And floating 10 feet away was a being that could wrestle a dragon. You run like a rat, Charon floated over the balcony railing, his skeletal feet not touching the floor. But even rats eventually run out of corners. Charon raised his staff again. The ruby tip glowed. Necrotic rain. Hundreds of small green orbs formed in the air above the balcony. Damn it, Damien looked around. The queen's room was right behind him. If he dodged, those orbs would hit the healers and the queen. I can't dodge, I have to tank it, but with what? Twang, twang, twang. 3 arrows streaked from the high tower above, moving faster than sound. They weren't aiming for Charon. Lyra knew her attacks couldn't pierce his shield. They aimed for the orbs. Boom, boom, boom. The wind arrows intercepted the largest clusters of necrotic magic, detonating them harmlessly in the air. Keep moving, Voss. Lyra's voice screamed through the communication stone, strained and desperate. I can't keep this up forever. His minions are climbing the tower. I'm trying, Damien yelled back. He grabbed a handful of mana crystals from his void gem, loot from the golden dragon dungeon, and crushed them in his hand. It was a wasteful, dangerous way to recover mana, risking vein rupture, but he had no choice. Raw, unrefined mana flooded his system. His veins bulged blue. Shadow Art Void Shield. He slammed his hands forward. A dome of black smoke erupted, covering him, Isabel, and the door to the queen's room. The remaining necrotic orbs rained down on the shield. His sizzle pop. Every impact felt like a hammer blow to Damien's chest. The shadow mana was being eaten alive by the rot. Persistent, Charon sighed, boring. The lick raised a hand, not using a spell this time. He just used telekinesis amplified by his 7th order mana. Bang! Under this pressure, Damien's shield shattered like glass. Instantly, an invisible fist slammed into his chest, launching him backward. He crashed through the wooden doors of the queen's chamber, sliding across the floor until he hit the foot of the bed. Young master! The healers screamed. Queen Eleanor, soaked in sweat and barely conscious, turned her head weakly. Damien, she wheezed. Damien coughed, tasting copper. His ribs were definitely broken. Charon floated through the broken doors. He looked around the room, at the terrified healers, the struggling queen, and the broken boy. So much life, Charon rasped, inhaling deeply. It smells disgusting. He looked at the queen's stomach. The seed is almost ripe. I will harvest it now. He walked toward the bed. No. Damien forced himself up. His legs were shaking. He grabbed his sword, even though he had no aura to coat it with. Shadow step. He tried to teleport, but the spell failed. The mana in the room was too chaotic. Run, just run at him. Damien charged. It was a clumsy, desperate lunge. Charon didn't even look at him. He backhanded the air. Smack! A wave of force hit Damien, throwing him against the wall. He slid down, gasping for air. Stay down, rat, Charon said dismissively. You have entertained me enough. The lick stood over the queen. He raised his staff, the tip poised directly over her stomach. Die! Roar! A massive figure smashed through the wall, not the door, the wall. Leona, the beast girl, burst into the room covered in green slime and zombie gore. Her armor was dented, her shield was gone, and she was bleeding from a dozen wounds. But she was roaring. Get away from him. She tackled Charon. It was like a car hitting a freight train. Leona, a physical powerhouse who could lift carriages, slammed into the lick with everything she had. Charon actually stumbled. For the first time, he was moved physically. Filthy beast, Charon snarled. He grabbed Leona by the throat with his skeletal hand. Crack! He lifted her off the ground. Leona gagged, clawing at his arm, her legs kicking helplessly. Leona! Damien shouted, trying to stand up, but his legs wouldn't listen. Strong body, Charon observed, looking at the struggling lion girl. You will make a fine zombie. He began to squeeze. Green necrotic energy flowed from his hand into her neck. Leona's struggles weakened. Her golden eyes began to roll back, the green light of undeath creeping into her irises. Let her go. Damien dragged himself forward. He had nothing left. No DP, no mana, no aura. He only had the contract gem. Unfortunately, even that was useless at the moment. She's dying, she's my subordinate, she's my sword. I won't let her die. Deep inside Damien's soul, the golden dragon aura, which had been dormant since he ran out of fuel, flickered. It responded not to mana, but to his will, to his greed. In an instant, he seemed to see a mighty proud golden dragon smirking at him in the air. I am the greedy king. What is mine, he roared. Whoosh! A spark of gold ignited in Damien's chest. It wasn't mana. It was life force. He was burning his own lifespan to fuel the aura. Dragon roar. Damien opened his mouth and screamed. It wasn't a human scream. It was the roar of a primal beast, amplified by the golden aura. A shockwave of golden sound blasted across the room. It slammed into Charon. The lick flinched, dropping Leona. The necrotic energy around his hand was shattered by the pure, kingly aura. Leona hit the floor, gasping, the green light fading from her eyes. Charon turned slowly to face Damien. His amusement was gone. The green flames in his eye sockets flared with genuine anger. "That roar," Charon hissed. "Is that dragon might? You are more than just a rat." Thinking of those powerful dragons that even his master didn't dare provoke. A hint of fear flashed in Charon's eyes as he wondered if there was a dragon behind this kid. In order not to take any chances, he needed to kill the kid now. "Enough playing, die kid." He began to chant. A spell of absolute darkness gathered at the tip of his staff, a spell meant to erase a soul completely. Damien, who currently leaned against a wall, his vision tunneling, sighed in desperation. Just now he had bought Leona a few seconds. He had bought the queen a few seconds. But unfortunately it was not enough. He was done. In the face of true power, all tricks and conspiracies were indeed meaningless. "Is this it?" Damien thought, watching the black light build. "I die here, like a side character." However, just when he was about to close his eyes and give up, a loud cry interrupted his thoughts. "Wah!" A sound cut through the darkness. It was the sharp, piercing cry of a newborn baby. In an instant the room froze. The black light on Charon's staff flickered. From the bed, a blinding pulse of white light exploded outward, a light not magic, but rather it was the pure, unadulterated source of life. Yes, the baby and future elf queen had arrived. Wah! A cry akin to a primordial resonance vibrated through the entire forest. It was the first breath of a being destined to rule, a pure, unfiltered shockwave of life mana that acted like a physical hammer against anything unholy. Hiss! Charon the Undying, the monster who had just tanked a gravity singularity and a dragon's roar without a scratch, suddenly screamed. It wasn't a scream of anger. It was a scream of genuine, searing pain. The blinding white light radiating from the queen's bedchamber washed over him like acid. His tattered gray robes, woven from the threads of the abyss, began to smoke and disintegrate. Green flames in his eye sockets flickered violently, dimming to mere pinpricks as the absolute darkness he had gathered at the tip of his staff shattered into harmless, dissolving mist. "The seed," Charon stumbled back in the air, shielding his skeletal face with his arm. Smoke poured from his joints. "It burns the purity it burns." He retreated, floating away from the balcony as if the light were physical fire, his composure completely broken. Damien, leaning heavily against the shattered wall, felt the light wash over him too. He flinched. However, unlike Charon, he felt quite comfortable. It felt warm. It felt like the first ray of sun after 100 years of winter. It soaked into his cracked ribs, his torn muscles, and his exhausted mana veins, stabilizing his crumbling life force just enough to keep his heart beating. Ding! A sound clearer than the baby's cry rang in Damien's mind. A translucent blue screen materialized in front of his eyes, bright and eager. "System alert, major plot point achieved, the birth of the High Elf Princess. Condition met, you have successfully protected the timeline's hope from corruption. Calculation complete, impact, S-tier, reward 1000 DP. Damien's eyes snapped open. 1000 DP. The number hovered in his vision, golden and beautiful. He went from broke to rich in a single second. The gamble, the reckless, suicidal gamble to use every point of mana and DP he had paid off. He had held the line just long enough for the heroine to arrive. He then looked up. Charon was stabilizing 50 meters away. The green fire in the lick's eyes was growing again, fueled by humiliation and rage. The life pulse had stunned him, but it wouldn't kill him. He's weakened. The life mana disrupted his connection to the void. His invulnerable shield is down. Damien tried to push himself off the wall, but his legs gave out. He slid back down, coughing blood. His body was done. He had nothing left to give. Unless... He stared at the 1000 DP balance. "System," Damien commanded, his voice raspy but filled with a terrifying new energy. "Spend 500 DP, full restoration." Confirming, 500 DP consumed, restoring HP mana aura to 100%. Whoosh! A golden light, separate from the baby's aura, erupted from Damien's chest. It was a sensation of absolute euphoria. The purple bruises on his chest vanished instantly. The broken ribs snapped back into place with a sickening crack that felt good. His mana core and aura heart, which had been wrung dry like old sponges, were instantly flooded with a torrential river of power. Damien took a deep breath, tasting the ozone, blood, and ash in the air. He stood up. He cracked his neck. "Hey, skeleton." Charon froze. He turned back, his eye sockets narrowing as he saw the boy he had just broken standing tall on the edge of the balcony, radiating peak condition. "You," Charon hissed, his voice vibrating with confusion. "How, you were empty, you were dead. I sensed your soul fatting." Damien walked forward to the edge of the railing. He didn't pick up his sword. He didn't need it. "I told you," Damien said, his eyes igniting. His left eye turned a deep, abyssal black. His right eye turned a glowing, reptilian gold. "I'm greedy. I don't die until I've taken everything." He clenched his fists. "Dual core reactivate." Boom! The pressure in the room spiked. The golden dragon aura and the Voss shadow magic swirled around him, no longer fighting for dominance but moving in a stable, violent vortex. The floorboards beneath his feet cracked under the sheer density of his presence. "You think a little healing will save you?" Charon roared, regaining his composure. He slammed his staff down, forcing the green necrotic mana to flare up, fighting back the white light of the baby. "I am a general of the void. I am eternal." Bone spear. Charon thrust his hand forward. The air twisted, and a massive, spinning lance made of compressed white bone materialized. It shot toward Damien's head faster than sound. Damien didn't dodge. He raised his right hand. The golden aura solidified, forming the spectral image of a dragon's claw over his own fingers. Crack! He caught the bone spear in midair, inches from his face. The momentum slid him back a few inches, digging deep furrows in the wooden floor, but his grip didn't waver. The spear spun and ground against his golden palm, screeching like metal on metal, but it couldn't pierce the dragon aura. "Is that all you got?" Damien squeezed. Crunch! The massive bone spear shattered into dust. He vanished. Shadow step. He reappeared in the air, right in front of Charon's floating form, occupying the space where the lick felt safest. Dual art eclipse hammer. Damien clasped his hands together above his head. He combined the crushing physical weight of the dragon with the cutting, erosive power of the shadow. He swung down like a sledgehammer. Charon raised his dragonspine staff to block, his green shield flickering back to life. Bang! The impact created a shockwave that blew out the remaining windows of the palace. The sound was deafening. Charon was smashed out of the air. He plummeted like a meteor, crashing into the balcony floor with enough force to crater the stone. But he didn't stay down. The lick dissolved into green mist before Damien could follow up, reappearing 10 meters away on top of a stone gargoyle. "Insolent brat!" Charon screamed, his voice distorting into a demonic screech. He waved his hands, and 12 green magic circles appeared in the air behind him. Death ray. 12 beams of concentrated necrosis, each one capable of rotting a hole through a mountain, fired at once. There was no pattern. It was a wall of death. Damien smirked. He looked at his remaining balance, 500 DP. I have one shot, I need speed. System suspended. Waiting for command. Edit skill, shadow step. Remove cooldown, remove range limit, max output. Processing done. The world seemed to slow down. Damien felt the restriction on his space movement skill vanish. Zip, zip, zip. Damien became a phantom. He teleported 12 times in a single second. He appeared on the wall, dodging the first beam. He appeared on the ceiling, dodging the second. He appeared in the air, spinning through the gap between the third and fourth. To Charon, it looked like Damien had cloned himself. He appeared behind the lick. Peekaboo. Charon spun around, swinging his staff in a panic. Damien ducked under the swing and delivered an uppercut wreathed in golden fire. POW. Charon's jaw shattered. Fragments of skull flew into the air. The lick was launched backwards, tumbling over the edge of the balcony and falling toward the plaza below. Damien walked to the edge. He looked down. The undead army in the plaza had paused, confused by the life mana pulse. Charon crashed into the middle of his own army, crushing a dozen zombies into paste. I'm not done with you, Damien growled. He jumped off the balcony, diving straight down toward the fallen general. As he fell, the wind whipping past his face, Damien focused his dual core. He pulled the shadows of the entire city toward him. He pulled the golden light of the dawn. He was going to end this with one hit. But as Charon stood up in the crater below, the green fire in his eyes turned a dark, abyssal purple. The air around him began to warp and decay. Enough, Charon's voice echoed, shaking the foundations of the world tree. You want to see a general's true power? Fine. The lick slammed his hands into the ground. Domain expansion, graveyard of the forgotten. The world turned gray. Domain expansion, graveyard of the forgotten. The world instantly turned gray. It seemed to have died. The balcony, the world tree, the burning city, they all vanished in a ripple of cold, colorless distortion. Damien found himself standing in an endless, twilight wasteland, filled with millions of crooked tombstones stretching to the horizon. The air was cold enough to freeze mana in his veins. The gravity here felt wrong, heavy, smelling of rot and absolute despair. System alert. You have entered a 7th order domain. Warning, user stats reduced by 50%. Mana regeneration halted. Warning, golden dragon aura is being suppressed. Survival chance, 0%. 0%, Damien laughed bitterly, spitting a clot of blood onto the gray dirt. Honest system. Charon floated above the tombstones, his form growing larger, more monstrous. In his domain, he wasn't just a lick, he was a god of death. The damage Damien had inflicted, the shattered jaw, the broken ribs, healed instantly as the gravestones around him pulsed with gray light. You fought well, child, Charon's voice boomed, echoing from everywhere at once. You have power that defies logic, but a candle cannot burn in a vacuum. He pointed a giant skeletal finger at Damien. Rot. It a projectile that seemed to represent the rules of this world. Hiss. Damien's golden dragon aura flickered and died, suffocated by the atmosphere. The shadow armor hissed, evaporating like steam on a hot pan. Arg, Damien dropped to one knee. The skin on his arms began to turn gray. His veins blackened as necrosis magic bypassed his defenses and attacked his life force directly. He couldn't stop it. The gap in tiers was too absolute. A 3rd order, even a dual-core one, simply didn't have the authority to exist inside a 7th order domain. I can't move. I can't breathe. Is this what an 7th order feels like? It's not a fight, it's an execution. Charon descended slowly, his spine-like staff raised high to crush Damien's skull. "Your soul is bright," Charon whispered, hovering inches from Damien's face. "It will be a fine lantern for my collection." Seeing this, Damien tried to lift his sword, but his arms felt like they weighed 1,000 tons. He looked up at the descending staff. "I need more power. System, do I have anything left? Anything to edit?" "DP 0. Damn, so this is the wall." He gritted his teeth, refusing to close his eyes. If he was going to die, he would die looking at his enemy. The staff came down. Clang! It didn't hit Damien. A barrier of pure, blinding white light materialized between them. Not gold, not fire, white. A vine, thick as a tree trunk and glowing with vibrant green vitality, erupted from the dead gray earth of the domain, wrapping around Charon's staff and halting it in midair. "Who dares intrude on my domain?" Charon roared, flinching as the white light burned his skin like acid. "I dare." A voice, weak but regal, echoed through the wasteland. Damien turned his head, his vision blurry. Walking through the gray mist, barefoot on the dead earth, was Queen Eleanor. She looked terrible. Her white dress was stained red with blood from the birth. Her face was pale as a sheet, and she was trembling with exhaustion. But her green eyes were burning with the fury of a mother whose child had been threatened. In her arms, wrapped in a simple cloth, was the newborn princess. The baby wasn't crying anymore. She was glowing, acting as a living battery of infinite life mana for her mother. "You tried to kill my daughter," Eleanor whispered. She raised her free hand. "World tree art, verdant sovereign." Boom! Roots exploded from the ground, shattering the tombstones. Grass and flowers bloomed instantly in the dead wasteland, spreading out from the queen's feet like a wildfire of life. The queen's seventh order aura flared, clashing violently with Charon's death mana. The gray world began to crack. "The elf queen," Charon hissed, retreating from the vines as they tried to grab his limbs. "You should be dead. You just gave birth. Your mana core should be empty." "It is," Eleanor admitted, coughing blood. "I am burning my lifespan to stand here, but that is enough to kill you." She looked at Damien. "Get up, nephew." She waved her hand. A green light washed over Damien, instantly healing and buffing him. The gray rot on his skin vanished. His mana reserves, which had been locked by the domain, suddenly unlocked and flooded to 200%. The crushing gravity of the graveyard lifted. "She's canceling out his domain rules," Damien realized, standing up. His dual core roared back to life, the gold and black swirling violently. "He is too strong for me to kill alone in this state," the queen said, her voice tight with pain. "I will break his shield. I will hold him down. You deliver the stroke." "Understood," Damien grinned, the blood dripping from his lip making him look savage. "Tag team it is." "Insolent insects," Charon screamed, his ego shattered. "I am eternal." The lick slammed his staff down. Bone tsunami. The ground liquefied, turning into a tidal wave of millions of sharp bones rushing toward them. "Isabel, now!" Damien shouted into the void, praying the contract link still worked across the dimension. It did. Outside the domain, back in the real world. Isabel lay exhausted on the balcony, but she heard him. She felt his will. Gravity crush. Inside the domain, the sky cracked. A massive, invisible gravitational foot slammed down on the bone tsunami, flattening it instantly into powder. "What?" Charon looked up confused. "Now, Auntie," Damien yelled. Queen Eleanor screamed, pouring her life force into the spell. Nature's judgment, thorny prison. Thousands of glowing white vines shot out, faster than sound. They pierced Charon's ghostly shield, wrapping around his arms, his legs, his staff, and his neck. Sizzle. The life mana burned the lick like holy water. Charon thrashed, roaring in agony, but he couldn't break free. He was pinned between the Queen's life and Isabel's gravity. "Damien," the Queen shouted, her knees buckling. "Do it now, I can't hold him." Hearing this, Damien instantly launched himself. He didn't use a skill, he used everything. He condensed the golden dragon aura into his right hand until it was a miniature sun. And on his left, he condensed the shadow magic until it was a black hole. Doing this, he then brought them together. Dual-core secret art, Chaos Lance. He merged the two energies into a spinning, unstable drill of gold and black energy on the tip of his sword. The space around the blade shattered. After which, he flew straight at Charon's exposed chest. "No, Charon screamed, seeing an energy that opposed the very concept of his existence. For the first time in a long time, he, the undead lord, finally felt the fear of death. "My lord, save him!" Damien thrust. Shing. The Chaos Lance pierced straight through the Lick's chest, shattering his ribcage and drilling into his core. "This," Damien whispered into the Lick's ear, "is for interrupting the birth." Boom! The energy exploded inside Charon. The domain shattered like glass. The gray world vanished. Pop! They were back in the Queen's bedroom. Charon's physical body was gone, vaporized by the blast. Only a black, cracked soul crystal remained floating in the air where his heart used to be. The Queen collapsed onto the bed, unconscious, clutching her baby. Damien fell to his knees, his vision going black. His dual-core state collapsed, leaving his eyes reverting to their natural sea blue. But he reached out and grabbed the floating black crystal before he fell. "System alert, 12th Demon General defeated. You have altered the course of the Great War. Calculating reward." Damien didn't hear the rest. He let the darkness take him. Somewhere in the void, a pair of massive, ancient eyes opened in the darkness. They weren't angry, they were amused. "The 12th has fallen, to a human child." A deep, rumbling laughter shook the stars. "Interesting, very interesting. Voss, you have bred a fine monster. Ugh, my head hurts. How long was I out? Where am I? What happened?" Waking up from Damien's mind was instantly in chaos as he struggled to get his senses back. His whole body hurt. His mana and aura core were faint, both giving signs that they were about to give out. The blue in his eyes had faded a bit, and his overall aura was weak. "Arg!" Grunting in pain just as he struggled to get up, a sharp pain came from his body, instantly forcing him to lie back down. In his current state, it seemed that even moving a bit was impossible. However, it doesn't seem like the worst has happened. If anything, the fact that I woke up on a bed intact means that we managed to win the battle. Saying this, he began to gather his thoughts, analyzing everything that had just happened. "Reckless, I was reckless," he muttered. "Looking at everything now, from the slave fortress, I should have noticed that something was wrong." According to Lyra's first report, the slave fortress was meant to be teeming with multiple Fourth Orders and even a Fifth Order leader. However, the strongest people we met were that fat bastard Kale and a Fourth Order Vargas. Adding to the fact that Vargas had mentioned the Twilight Order behind him, I should have put two and two together and known that they would be aiming for the elves. They probably mobilized most of their personnel for this operation. The more he thought about it, the more Damien felt he had been complacent. Because he got the golden dragon breathing method, a part of him had begun to become prideful. Calling himself the king of greed multiple times, he tried to establish this powerful and mysterious persona wherever he went. However, that isn't me. I'm not the protagonist. I'm not even the original Damien Voss. I'm just a loser named Lin Ye, who never made it into society properly before being transported to the strange world. In such a situation where all kinds of gods and demons appear out of nowhere, How dare I be proud? Speaking slowly, Damien's voice began to become lower and lower with each sentence. Before this, apart from his fight with Isabel, all his battles had been crushing wins for him, with even the golden dragon golem not giving him that much trouble. However now, after truly brushing shoulders with death, Damien began to doubt himself. He began to wonder if he would even survive the next year, let alone reach the end of his story. Adding to the fact that his family now was probably fighting for their lives against the second prince, Damien felt completely powerless. For the first time in his new life, he suddenly wondered if he shouldn't just give up. Even with the system, is it really possible to change destiny? Is this the so-called, you cannot change the direction of the river, but you can redirect the streams? The general trend cannot be changed, only the small trends can be adjusted. Recalling some Taoist classics from his former world, Damien began to wonder if they were true. Even if he could save Thuron from dying as a baby, could he really stop the Voss family from falling? Thinking of all this, Damien slowly began to lose his motivation. He began to doubt the point of his new life. Was his struggle truly worth it in the end? Ha ha ha, funny, isn't it? Even the dungeon I entered to get the golden dragon aura was me being lucky. Not because I arrived here so early, Italica's corpse should still be hidden somewhere, not fully releasing her mana. If she had not just golems, the entire place would have been crawling with dragon beasts, and the guardian would have probably been way stronger. If I went when the slave fortress was at full strength, even if I won, I would have probably pushed my body to the limit, and maybe some slaves would have died. Lost in thought, Damien's confidence diminished by the second. Fortunately, just before he could continue to self-wallow, 3 familiar voices came into his ears. Wrapped in bandages and even using crutches, Isabel, Leona and Lyra made their way into the room. "Young master, young lord, Voss kid," they yelled, smiling happily that he had woken up despite being seriously injured. A scene that made Damien's heart ache. In front of him, the 3 of them could practically be called walking mummies. Leona no longer looked like that cheery battle maniac beast girl. Rather, her condition was the worst of all of them. Her whole lower body was wrapped in bandages. Her aura was practically non-existent, even weakening to an extent. Looking at her closely, Damien even felt the breath of death hovering over her. It seemed that the last sacrifice she made a mark, as the current her, even if she didn't die from her injuries later on, she would never be able to wield a sword again. And beside her, Isabel and Lyra, while still bad, with proper medication and treatment, they should be able to recover in about 3 months. This battle was truly a tragic one. "Leona, Lyra, Isabel," he muttered, looking at 3 of them who were excitedly approaching him. Damien, whose heart ached for their state, instantly did one thing that made the 3 of them pause in their steps. "Arg!" Grunting in pain, he forced himself to sit up, even at the cost of his internal injuries getting worse. He mustered all his strength to sit up. "3 of you stop." Stopping them from getting any closer, with a face full of remorse, he bowed his head. "3 of you, especially Leona, I'm sorry. I didn't intend for things to end this way. I was overconfident. Challenging a 7th order being with my barely stable 4th order state. Had Charon not been toying with us for the most part, and Eleanor sacrificing her lifespan to help, the 3 of us would have died since." Saying this, he bowed his head, unable to face any of them. It seemed his so-called black thread had finally cut, without being able to weave anything meaningful. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down.